Welcome back to Pace's Playbook, Episode 4, the much-awaited Zach Wilson discussion. Now, real quick before I get started, I am in a hotel room, so if you hear the sounds of the city outside, I apologize. But one thing I will not apologize for, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Zach Wilson is going to be a Pro Bowler, or that he'll save the Jets and lead them to the Super Bowl, or that he'll end up a Hall of Famer at the end of all of this. No, I think that NFL careers are largely unpredictable, especially for quarterbacks. Zach Wilson has a lot of positive traits, but a lot of people hadn't even heard of him until this college football season. That 73.5 completion percentage was attractive, but also you have to look at his strength of schedule, which was nearly nothing, almost all FCS teams. Now, I don't think these things count him out, but I don't think anything is a sure thing for a quarterback transitioning into the NFL. There's a max of 1 to 2 great ones every year. What I do want to do is take a look at some Zach Wilson stats. Now, what I do at CBS Sports is I work in research. So what we do is every single week we prepare a packet of the most notable games going into the next weekend. And I wrote a lot about Zach Wilson and the BYU Cougars. There's a lot of things I noticed in his game during this season, and I did kind of a deep dive into his stats, found the ones that I thought were the most notable, and we'll take a look and see why he's such a top NFL prospect at this point in the game. So I'll start with this. Zach Wilson's performances in the games that mattered the most in his college career. When you go to a small school like BYU, especially in the year 2020, when you're not in a conference and most of your opponents are FCS schools, it's those big games that you build your name on. Now, I love small school football. My favorite conference to watch is the Sun Belt. I'm a huge advocate of those smaller schools getting to play on a big stage. So naturally, I was very excited when BYU and Coastal Carolina, both undefeated at the time, announced that they were going to add a game and play each other. I wanted to see one of them go to the college football playoff. Keep in mind that at this point, Zach Wilson is not tied to the Jets in any way. It's still so off the radar that he could possibly be in New York. So I'm looking at this totally objectively just as a college football fan. When I watched that game, that Mormons and Mullets showdown, I felt bad for Zach Wilson. I felt like he outplayed Coastal's quarterback, and the stats show it. He had more than double his passing yards. He threw for a touchdown and Grayson McCall didn't. He had a better passer rating, more completions. He definitely outplayed his opposing quarterback. BYU itself just kind of fell flat, and I think a lot of the hype around their offense and around Zach Wilson died a little bit after that game, and I totally did not think it was fair to him. Yes, his completion percentage was in the lower 60s instead of the higher 70s, but Zach Wilson did not have a bad game, and it was not him that didn't show up against Coastal Carolina, that being one of their only ranked opponents of the season. That being said, Wilson and the Cougars did have an impressive win over a ranked Boise State team earlier on in the season, and looking back at Zach Wilson's performance against ranked opponents versus unranked opponents, you can see that it's not too far off. He actually has more pass yards per game against ranked opponents in his career. He might be 2-4, one of those wins against Boise State, but the other win was actually against a ranked USC team led by quarterback Keaton Slovis, who as of now is looking to be a future NFL draft prospect as well. His touchdown to interception rating is obviously much different against the ranked opponents, but his production in terms of passing yards and his completion percentage, they're not too far off in his career versus these top tier opponents. How about Zach Wilson's flashiest attribute as a quarterback prospect, the deep ball? I know most of us have seen the video from BYU Pro Day of Wilson slinging it down the field, making it look easy. If you haven't, you're definitely going to want to take a look. But one stat in particular I want to look at is his passes of 30 plus yards in his quarterback career at BYU. This season, he finished with 32 passes of 30 plus yards in 12 games. It took Alabama's Mac Jones 13 games to do the same, 32 passes of 30 plus yards, which was tied for second best in FBS football. Only Florida's Kyle Trask had more, with 35 passes of 30 plus yards. If you watched Alabama or Florida's offenses, you know it's impressive that Wilson and the Cougars stuck with them with those explosive offensive plays in high numbers. More specific to his development as a quarterback is his passes of 30 plus yards in comparison to his total passing attempts on the season. Now, this year's 32 on 336 pass attempts, the most he's had in a single season in his only full season as BYU's starter in every game, as opposed to last year in 2019. He had 11 passes of 30 plus yards in 319 attempts. You'll also see this reflected in other stats that we'll look at in a moment. But his middle year as a sophomore, he was really just adjusting to the increased number of reps and maintaining consistency, which he achieved in his junior year in 2020. And looking back at 2018, he was still throwing several passes of 30 plus yards with 8 in only 182 attempts. We've established that with time, increased reps, and familiarity with the offense, that Wilson can be lethal when it comes to making plays with the deep ball. But let's talk about his accuracy. This season, he broke the long-standing record by former BYU quarterback and NFL Hall of Famer Steve Young for single-season completion percentage. Wilson completed 73.5% of his passes, but some wondered if it was a fluke. Did the ease of their schedule leave him plenty of time in the pocket and plenty of time for their receivers to get opened? Some of it, maybe. And if you take a look really quickly at his stats, you might think that it looks like this season was just an outlier. But there's always been the potential there from Wilson. His freshman year in 2018, in one of the 9 games he played in, he actually completed 18 of 18 passes against Western Michigan in December. And if you take a closer look at his stats related to accuracy, you'll see that it makes sense with the trend of his passes of 30 plus yards. Now in 2018, he started out with a 65.9 completion percentage on less than 200 pass attempts. And you look up at 2019, and it's no coincidence that he has the lowest completion percentage, lowest touchdown percentage, and highest interception percentage the same year that he had the largest increase in pass attempts. Clearly, Wilson was still adjusting to the BYU offensive system. And you could see the early potential in 2018. 65.9 completion percentage is good. 6.6 touchdown percentage, good. 1.6 interception percentage, great stuff. And you look ahead to 2020, and maybe the numbers are inflated by the level of opponent in which they played. But I think either way, you see a huge jump from 2019 to 2020 as Wilson solidifies himself in the system, becomes more familiar with his receivers, and overall establishes himself as the starter at BYU, which he never was consistently before. And keep in mind that already impressive 73.5 completion percentage doesn't even account for the 11 dropped passes by BYU receivers, according to PFF. Additionally, a 0.9 interception percentage. That is crazy in itself, and the numbers look even crazier on paper. 33 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions, 11 touchdowns for every 1 interception. Clearly, Zach Wilson can read the field well, and his accuracy is not a fluke. With all of that in mind, that is just some of what makes Zach Wilson such a good quarterback prospect. I'm not 100% sold on the Jets needing to draft him, but I do think that that's likely who they're going to pick. I trust Joe Douglas. I trust Robert Saleh. I also trust that they're doing their due diligence on this quarterback class because I think there's a lot of potential in this class. I won't say future NFL talent, but I do see a lot of potential. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think this is a year where you find a quarterback like a Dak Prescott, a 4th rounder that grows into a starter that was seemingly overlooked with lots of potential to be great in the NFL. We will see how it all plays out pretty soon. Until next time, this was Pace's Playbook.